Back at it, talking some baseball here in the winter months. It is the Kaufman Corner. Soren Petro along with the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, and a lot to talk about tonight. The Royals making a big free agent signing. I can't wait to hear how giddy Rany is. Jordan Lyles, since we've been doing our best of our all-time Royals roster. We haven't had a chance to get into Jordan Lyles. We'll do that. RyanO'Hearn, what the hell was that? What was going on with that? He's no longer a Royal, but why was he ever a Royal? Rany will explain that to you, I'm hoping. Why can't the Royals make a deal like the Tigers just did? They moved a solid reliever, headed into arbitration for young bats. Is that it for the Royals in free agency? Is there anything left in free agency? Maybe if there's time, we'll review what we were wanting to see happen on the free agent market. It's all coming up next here on the Kaufman Corner.
This is the Kaufman Corner Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening. If you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream the podcast live. You can be a part of it, be in the chat room. We can see your comments, hear your thoughts. Well, not technically hear them, but at least read your thoughts. We do it every Sunday night, sometimes on Monday at 10 p.m. Central. We thank everybody who is already in and throwing some comments around here in the chat room. It is the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli from Baseball Prospectus, as you heard, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. And it's been a little bit since we've talked about real Royals news, Rany, because we did our all-time roster, which, by the way, thank you for all the great feedback we got. We got a lot of people that really enjoyed it. I heard my favorite was somebody talking about getting together with their dad. And they now want a written breakdown of our 26-man roster. So we have to get that together. We have to go back and take our notes and put it together so I can email it over, because they want to further chew on the 26-man roster that we put together. But a little real baseball news. So thank you for everybody who enjoyed that. It was certainly a labor of love for the two of us, I know. But Rany, let's start at the top with Jordan Lyles. Your first chance to dive into it. Reaction to what the Royals were able to get done. Your level of excitement with the addition of Jordan Lyles. Does this make your free agent day?
Well, first off, I do want to say that I'm glad we timed our holiday podcasts when we did, because we took a gamble that the Royals wouldn't make any jaw-dropping moves, any dramatic changes to their roster while we took a little journey down history lane, and we were right.
You really call it a gamble? You're not much of a gambler if you think that was a gamble.
I try and take smart gambles. I take safe gambles that aren't really gambles. And yes, you are correct. It felt like a safe decision, and it was. We got all the drama of the Jordan Lyles move, and looking at the Royals transaction page, the only other addition to the roster that I see was a pitcher named Nick Whitgren being signed to a minor league deal in the last 3 weeks. Who, this being the Royals, might end up in their bullpen at some point, but not an earth-shattering move. So, yes, the big move of the offseason. After all the time you and I spent ranking free agents, talking about all the pitchers that we were interested in, talking about all the pitchers who have signed 2-year contracts around the league, including one of your favorites, Andrew Heaney, Jose Quintana, Sean Manaea, all these guys getting 2-year contracts in the $25 million range. The Royals went out and signed their own pitcher to a 2-year contract. Not $25 million, but $17.5 million, 70% of what those guys were making. And for 70% of, potential number 2 starter money, a pitcher with upside money like an Andrew Heaney, or a very safe number 3 option like a Jose Quintana, The Royals got Jordan Lyles, which made me ask the question: was Dylan Bundy out of their price range? I mean, look, God love Jordan Lyles. He's been in the major leagues 12 years now. He came up when he was like I want to say 20, 21, 20 years old. He made his debut with the Astros and hasn't really progressed as a pitcher since he debuted 12 years ago. The best thing you can say for the guy is he takes the ball every fifth day. He made 32 starts this past year for the Orioles. The year before that, he made 30 starts for the Rangers. The fact that he changed teams between 2021 and 2022 and is changing teams again should be a clue as to the quality of those 30 starts that you're getting. A 4.42 ERA last year, a 5.15 ERA the year before. His peripherals are no different. His career ERA is 5.1 for a guy who's made 214 starts in the majors. That in itself is kind of a miracle that he's still getting the ball with an career ERA of over 5. Now, he did pitch for the Rockies for many years. Before that, he was on the Astros during their the horrible stretch, their rebuilding stretch when they lost 110 games like 3 years in a row. So he's had the misfortune of being sort of cast as the sacrificial lamb for a number of teams. And he's supposedly a good guy in the clubhouse, which I completely believe, because how else do you survive in the major leagues and get to be in a major league rotation every fifth day with a performance that's this mediocre? So I'm not saying he's not somebody who can make your team a little bit better, but 2 years, $17.5 million better? I really feel like this is a case of the Royals spending 70% of the money for 30% of the talent. And I don't get it. I don't think that this was money well spent for a team where every dollar counts. This is exactly the way you should not be spending your money. If your money is that precious, the worst thing you can do is spend millions of dollars. Maybe it's not 12 million a year, but it's 8 or 9 million a year on a guy who doesn't move the needle. And Jordan Lyles doesn't move the needle.
It's the second year, right? Like, that's what you're sitting here scratching your head at. They signed up for 1 year, $8.5 million. You say to yourself, okay, the payroll is low. They've got the money. And so they're trying to just bring in competition for the young guys so that if Chris Bubich stinks, he goes down, right? There's real competition there. I think that's, the thing that, it is I could get my arms around. Okay. Competition. The second year is what I cannot get my arms around. And, you dig through fan graphs and you try to say, what is it? Well, it's a declining fastball. Okay. Which is true of everybody as they get into their 30s, usually because they have picked up better breaking stuff, right? They command their breaking stuff better. The fastball comes down because they use the other stuff. My best guess is that this is a little bit of raised-dom, and they're saying he's been preached fastball. The only hope for this is that there's a big-time spin rate, or they're going to unlock a big-time spin rate, and he's going to start throwing breaking ball after breaking ball after breaking ball. He's going to be an entirely different pitcher in what he does, and they're going to unlock some potential that has been wasted by these other clubs. That's the only hope. It's a new regime. I give them that opportunity. But otherwise, they have signed a guy who's less than league average and guaranteed him 2 years. And that just makes absolutely no sense to me. Absolutely. Like, I will tell you that I'm not going to say this regime is going to live or die with the Jordan Lyles signing, but he needs to be a productive signing, or it's a really bad sign that you threw this kind of money, which isn't that much, but that's the point. It's not for much. I mean, this is probably going to be available on the waiver wire later on. I always joke around when I do fantasy leagues, when somebody, whatever the league is, when somebody grabs some and they're all crafty, I go, yeah, tell me about it when I pick them up off waivers after you dropped them week 4, right? Like, that's in real baseball terms, that's what Jordan Lyles is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, to me, giving him the 2 years, it doubles the downside, because if it's a turkey, it doubles the amount of time and the amount of money that you have to give him, but it doesn't double the upside. Because do you actually think he's going to be a better pitcher, a year from now when he's 33, 33 instead of 32? I don't. And the longer any free agent contract goes, the more time you are giving that player for something to go wrong. And if I had to bet right now, will Jordan Lyles be in the rotation in September of 2024? If I'm not a gambling man, as you know, but like if you could take even odds on that, I would certainly bet that he is not in their rotation in September of 2024. And if he is, it's probably a really bad sign for the Royals that they don't have 5 pitchers better than him. And to me, I think part of what bothers me is that what they did with the signing is they went for bulk innings over quality, which is the sort of thing you do when either you just don't have any pitching in your organization, or you have a lot of young pitchers, but they're still not ready for the major leagues, and you want to resist the temptation to rush them. Like you said, competition is helpful when you're afraid, Chris Bubich is not ready for the major leagues. Daniel Lynch may not be ready for the major leagues. But I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. When you talk about, do the Royals have enough pitching in their organization? Well, they certainly should, because the guys that they drafted 4 years ago out of college, the Singer, Lynch, Bubich, Jonathan Heasley, Jackson Kowar class, they're all, they have a lot of pitchers in their farm system that are supposed to be ready for the major leagues, but not just ready for the major leagues. Chris Bubich has been in the rotation for the better part of 3 years. Daniel Lynch has been in the rotation for 2 years. Like, it's you can't rush these guys. They're already here. It's shutting the barn doors after the horses come out. Like, you've already rushed them. So bringing in a pitcher now, why? So you can send Bubich and Lynch back to AAA? Is that really going to help their development?
Well, give me your starting 5 with this. Hang on, I'll come back to that. To give him 2 years means they had to be competing with somebody, right?
They may have been competing with themselves. We don't know. I think probably, I have no doubt that Jordan Lyles was getting 1-year offers elsewhere. Right. But was somebody else giving him 2 years? I don't think so. And if I would have much rather the Royals give him more money for 1 year than to go give that second year. And I do think what other teams are looking at there is the reliability. He takes the ball every 5th day. His arm is sound. It's healthy. And there's something to be said for that. Like a pitcher cannot improve, a pitcher cannot develop if he's not able to pitch. And so the best thing you could say for him is his arm is intact. He has a good motion. He doesn't put a lot of stress on his arm. So the Royals think that they can probably make some subtle tweaks and changes without risking injury, because he's shown an ability to stay healthy all these years. And that's something. I don't think that's 2 years something, but it's something.
Right.
But I just feel like the philosophy of signing a bulk guy over an upside guy is fundamentally flawed. And let me give you the counter example, because the other thing we hear about is, like you said, is, they were competing with somebody, or they couldn't lure pitcher X to Kansas City because they're not winning and they would have had to overpay. Well, let's talk about another pitcher who signed a free agent contract. I think a few days after Jordan Lyles. I don't have the exact date here, but I'm pretty sure this came afterwards. And that is Wade Miley.
Okay.
Wade Miley, left-handed pitcher. He's older. He's going to be 36. He only made 9 starts, or nine appearances last year. 8 starts, only 37 innings. He did pitch a full season, 28 starts in 2021, but much better quality. He had a 3.16 ERA last year, and a 3.37 ERA the year before. His FIP was below 4 both years. His career ERA is 4.13, a full run lower. As a guy who's actually, pitched in, made starts in the postseason. Jordan Lyles has never played on a postseason team, not entirely his fault. But I mean, Wade Miley at one point was a postseason starter caliber pitcher. The problem with him is you don't know if he's healthy or not. But you know what the Brewers gave him? $4.5 million for 1 year. There's a mutual option which we can ignore. And counting the buyout, which is $1 million, it's a total of $4.5 million guaranteed. I think there's $1.5 million in incentives. So if he maxes out, he's completely healthy for 2023, he makes $6 million. Are you telling me, the Royals would have had to pay more to get him? Sure. $17.5 million versus $4.5 million? I think he would have signed for that. I think he would have signed for 1 year if it was like $10 million.
And it's clear when they don't go, because the upside's much higher with Miley, that what they're looking for is dependability. So what's the plan? What's the upside with this decision? I'll take a crack at it and say maybe we're going to see the opener employee, because Yarborough and Lyles are both guys that scream for an opener. Someone to go mow down the top of the order and hand it over to them for 6.
Well, Yarborough has done that. Yarborough was the original guy who was the whatever the opener followers, the seconder, I guess you would call him.
He was an iconic piece of my championship bullpen, as I got to count him as a reliever going 5 innings.
He had like 17 wins or something.
Yeah, that was great. I loved him that year at that point. Again, he was a pickup, though. He wasn't plan A for my team. He was a crafty little move I made to pick a guy up coming down the stretch, which is how I think ball clubs should have viewed him coming into this. But I can only assume that the upside plan is they want dependable innings, and they think the bullpen's going to be lights out. They're going to open a couple of times maybe during the week, and they're going to mow things down. They want competition. They think they can make this guy a little bit better and spin him and trade him. If they unlock him and there's some crafty breaking ball that even he doesn't realize he has, that he needs to throw more, then I guess that's the silver lining to this. But it seems so far-fetched and comes with 3 or 4 ifs before you get to the payoff, and those almost never get to the payoff.
Well, and I think the fact that you lumped him in with Ryan Yarbrough is perfect, because Ryan Yarbrough got 1 year and $3 million. Jordan Lyles, if the Royals had signed him for 1 year and $3 million, I think we'd both be like, yeah, that's a good signing, and he's depth, and he got 6 times the guaranteed money that Ryan Yarbrough did. I'm not sure which one I'd rather have. I think Yarbrough has more upside. Lyles can throw more innings. But for a team that's got lots of pitchers, they just sort of don't know where they fit. I'd rather have the high upside guy, because if you have any hope of contending in 2023 or 2024, let's talk about what the rotation will look like. The rotation right now, you got Brady Singer at the top. And Brady Singer, no warts there. Like we love the guy. He's established himself as an above average starter, maybe ace upside, but let's just say number 2 starter, right? After him it's probably Jordan Lyles is the number 2 guy. Brad Keller is going to be in that rotation.
Wait a minute. Hang on. First of all, Jordan Lyles is the number 2 guy just based on his salary.
Yeah.
You're going to have to walk him out there, because that's how the clubhouse works. So if you're going to pay a guy $8.5 million, you better not send one of the other kids out there in front of him, or that's going to be a crap show. I'm just going to tell you that. Like, we're giving $8.5 million for this guy, and he's going to walk out there 4th. He better be the second guy to walk up on the mound. All right. Or you've already got issues with the
yeah, I mean, there's always a chance. I don't know. Daniel Lynch comes into spring training. He's throwing 100, and there's somebody who pops up, but clearly he's clearly in the rotation. Right, and he's probably at the top half of it. Yes.
But then the next piece, if Brad Keller's in this rotation, I mean, this has to spell the end of Brad Keller in the rotation.
Well, he's making what, $6 million, $7 million? I don't think we'll know. I think the estimate is between $6 and $7 million in arbitration.
Right.
Are they going to take that guy and put him in the bullpen? I mean, that's an expensive bullpen piece. The Royals have shown no inclination towards doing that. Now, everything we talk about, as we've said for months, when it comes to pitching, comes with that caveat that because they are completely overhauling their pitching development, we have to withhold some sort of judgment on these guys, because I'm optimistic 1 or 2, maybe even 3 or 4 of these guys that are in that, on that pitching staff are going to take a step forward. That I have to believe that as a Royals fan and as somebody who is committed to the idea that so much of the problem last year was pitching, was their philosophy. There's going to be some breakouts. So yeah, Brad Keller comes out and he's a new man. We'll give them all the credit in the world for that. But you cannot build your entire plan for the 2023 season on, well, we're just going to take a bunch of guys that nobody else wants and turn them into a championship pitching staff. I mean, that's not how the Dodgers and the Astros do it. Like it doesn't happen overnight. So there has to be actually some baseline talent there. And the baseline talent of this rotation right now, the most talented guys after Singer, if you were to tell me that we're going to have another above average starter in that rotation, and I had to guess who, I'm not picking Lyles or Brad Keller or Ryan Yarbrough. I'm probably picking Daniel Lynch. And frankly, the third guy is probably Chris Mubich. I still think those 2 guys have more upside in 2023, not 5 years this coming season, I would rather bet on Daniel Lynch or Chris Bubich to take a step forward than Lyles or Yarbrough or Keller. Lyles in particular, because Lyles and Yarbrough didn't have the handicap that all those other guys have, which was that they had Cal Eldred as their pitching coach last year. Like, you assume they're already coming from an organization that has some baseline competence in pitching development. If nobody after 12 years has unlocked Jordan Lyles' star potential, I don't see how the Royals are suddenly going to do that in 2023.
No, I would agree. So what do you think the rotation is? Right? What are we looking at on opening day? The first 5 starters will be who?
I think it's going to be Singer, Lyles, Keller. I'm hopeful it will be Lynch and Bubich, with Yarbrough being maybe in some sort of long man role. I think that, if you're looking for a true dark horse, Angel Serper might actually be a dark horse there, Max Castillo. But I mean, unless they're still going to sign Zach Greinke, which I guess is still out there, but that's part of the frustration here, is that they just is the Jordan Lyles signing a concession from the Royals that Zach Greinke is too rich for their blood, and this is the replacement.
I think it is, don't you? Because I mean, last year we heard that them being interested supposedly in Frankie Montas. I had people close to the A's that told me Royals' offer isn't good enough. They're not getting to what it takes. And when that happened, we're like, oh, they signed Zach Greinke and they're going to get Montas. Wow, they're really going on. No. And that's what this feels like to me. This is the one guy they're going to sign. This is the Zach Greinke replacement. And that's really disheartening. I mean, that is really disheartening if you're a Royals fan.
It's disheartening just from a standpoint of talent. It's from the standpoint of settling for a guy. But it's also disheartening because, signing Jordan Lyles is not – it's not a cheap move. It's not a move of a cheapskate owner. It's a move of a team that's willing to spend money. It's just a really bizarre allocation of resources. Like, all the things we can criticize about the signing, the one thing I won't say is, the Royals won't spend money. They're willing to spend money on Jordan Lyles. A lot of money. But spending, being willing to spend on Jordan Lyles and not being willing to spend 50% more on a pitcher that really moves the needle, whether it is an Andrew Heaney type that could be a number 2 starter but is often hurt, or a more safe Zach Greinke, Jose Quintana option, where you're missing the upside, but you're getting a guy who's a league average starter with maybe a little bit better than league average, and instead spending almost the same amount of money on a guy who's going to be a number 4 starter at the very best, and probably a number 5 guy.
Yeah,
and nobody's going out to the ballpark to watch Jordan Lyles pitch. Nothing personal.
Best case scenario for me is Brad Keller morphs into a lights out back end bullpen guy. Lyles, they unlock something. Singer continues to progress and is at the top of this rotation. Yarborough's the long guy, Lynch, Bubich, and then take your pick out of one of the other young guys. Finishes it off. I'd like to see Zach Greinke back. I don't think we're going to see it. We can't talk about Lyles without also talking about the corresponding move that happened with it. That was designating RyanO'Hearn. We had this question from Terry. Strange situation. Why sign him in the first place? Could have picked up a Rule 5 guy. Yeah, I know. Something, as you know, Terry, we have discussed here. We couldn't figure it out. I mean, we're going to track the Rule 5 guys and see if anybody comes out of it. They had the 5th pick. They passed. I'm baffled. In fact, the name you mentioned who they signed may have been a Rule 5 guy that's already been released. I'll have to go back and look. That name is sounding familiar to me, but maybe it's just I saw the transaction at some point, and that's why it's ringing a bell. But anyway, what the hell was RyanO'Hearn? I mean, what the absolute hell?
Well, this is the funny thing is we keep looking for signs that the Royals are a new organization doing new things, and they've given us plenty of fodder for that, between signing Matt Quatrero and Brian Sweeney and all these moves they made. Then they make the completely they throw us the turd in the punch bowl when they tendered RyanO'Hearn a contract, which we couldn't believe. Then they make this bizarre Jordan Lyles signing, but then they kind of temper it by, we got to make room for Jordan Lyles, so we're going to release RyanO'Hearn, which you and I would have been thrilled about 2 months ago. I wouldn't say thrilled because it was such an obvious move, but at least pleased by. So they made the right move, but only after tendering of a contract. The question which I have been told that tendering a contract guaranteed him, because he got a $1.4 million salary. If someone in the organization wants to reach out and tell us that no, that they're not actually on the hook for any of that, well, I appreciate that knowledge, because the CBA has changed, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the new CBA, but I've been told that that contract is guaranteed. Now, they traded him to after designating him for assignment, they ended up actually trading him to the Orioles for cash considerations, which could mean anything. I certainly would be shocked if they got rid of the entire contract and the Orioles gave them money for that contract. Cash considerations here means that the two teams came to some sort of arrangement regarding how much money the Orioles would pay out of his contract. The Royals probably ate at least some of it. Now, the mystery thickens, because literally 2 days later, the Orioles signed another minor league first baseman and realized, oh, this guy's better than RyanO'Hearn, and released RyanO'Hearn 2 days after they had traded for him. So the Orioles don't exactly come out of this looking great either. RyanO'Hearn may just have some mystifying powers of persuasion. He is a good guy by all accounts. I cannot speak to the Orioles side of this. All I know is that the Royals are almost certainly spending money on RyanO'Hearn that they didn't need to spend, but ultimately they came to the right decision and realized that there's just no place for him on the roster. And the one thing that came out of all this is my suspicion that within the Royals organization themselves, there is probably a difference of opinion on RyanO'Hearn and sort of roster construction, which would not surprise me at all, given that they just brought in a bunch of new guys from outside the organization. Is this a situation where the pre-existing front office has obviously stood by RyanO'Hearn all of these years, likes what he brings to the table from a clubhouse perspective, wanted to keep him around, and maybe it took Matt Quatraro and maybe Brian Sweeney's perspective coming from an in-division rival after 2 months to convince the rest of the front office that, RyanO'Hearn is a great guy, but he doesn't actually make our team better. He doesn't hit well enough to justify the roster spot. And if that's what happened, then I almost give them a pass that there was some organizational, disagreement that has ultimately been resolved. It just was very strange all around.
I like those comments. Says this offseason may have broken me. My give a poop meter is in the meh zone. Yeah, I agree. And then Terry says, and of course the Royals will pick him up on the cheap. Yeah. I do fully expect to see him in surprise. We're going to get back to spring training for the first time this year on my radio show, and so I'm looking forward to being out there. But I fully expect to see RyanO'Hearn in that clubhouse. I mean,
it would not at all surprise me if he's on a minor league contract. Frankly, I think what I'm hoping for everyone's sake, including RyanO'Hearn, is that he gets a deal either in Japan or in South Korea. He feels like the kind of player who could actually that quadruple A guy who could hit 30 bombs and be a very popular player and make seven figures playing in the Far East. But all right, feeling that yes, he could very well be back in Arizona.
Yeah. Let's turn the page to what the Detroit Tigers did. We're not going to break down the Tigers organization, but it is the kind of deal that I'm getting the sense, Rany, you'd like to see the Royals make. The Tigers moved Gregory Soto, who's been their closer and an all-star by default at times, but had an ERA just over 3. Been at the back end of the bullpen for the Tigers. They trade him, lefty, hard thrower, along with young utility player Cody Clemens, son of Roger Clemens, to the Philadelphia Phillies. In exchange, they get 3 players, all of whom got some action at the big league level last year with the Phillies in their run to the postseason, and all have versatility other than Donnie Sands, who's a catcher. But Matt Vierling and Nick Maton up at the top of it. You like this deal for the Tigers?
I certainly like the deal from the standpoint of what the Tigers are thinking about their organization and where they are in terms of building a winning roster, which is when you are not a good team and you have a reliever who is, a quality reliever right now, there is no more foolproof sort of obvious move than to trade a major league quality reliever now for assets which might be good in the future. And the Tigers are not going to miss Gregory Soto. He was a good reliever. He was not a great reliever. He was a good reliever. His command has never been sharp enough for him to be truly dominant. But as a left-hander, he's got some unique characteristics there that I think made Dave Dombrowski in Philadelphia, who is always on the lookout for sort of unique talents, needle movers, and that's why he was willing to make this deal. But they gave up 3 hitters. And like I said, Sands is a catcher. When the catcher, we got I think got a OBP over 400 in AAA last year. Catcher can get on base. He's probably not a starter, but certainly a very good backup catcher, second string catcher. And then in Matt Vierling and Nick Maton, 2 young, versatile guys. Both can play. They've both played outfield and infield, actually. And Vierling in particular made some swing changes last year. Our friend Keith Law, who's not always keen on young prospects that everyone else is, actually is quite high on this trade for the Tigers because he felt like Vierling made some swing changes last year, which give him the potential to be, an everyday player and everyday outfielder. And if you can trade a reliever for an everyday position player, you are always coming out ahead. And Greg Soto has got 3 years of club control left. And my point isn't even so much, the Royals should do this right now. The point is that the Royals should have been doing this for most of the last 15 years. It's a sort of trade that we've talked about them, we've urged them to make so many times, and they almost never do. They didn't do it with Joaquin Soria 15 years ago. They didn't do it with Scott Barlow last summer. And now Scott Barlow, because when you look at this, Greg Soto or Scott Barlow has a better track record of success. He's only got 2 years of club control right now versus 3, but he could certainly bring back, I think, this level of a package. You might argue right now in January 2023, the Royals are hoping to contend here in the next year. Maybe this is not the time to make that deal. But a year ago, it absolutely was. And it's frustrating because the Royals don't make it, but it's also a sign because this is new management in Detroit. All right. They fired Avila, last summer, and they didn't promote from within like the Royals did. They brought in a completely new front office, and that front office is making a decision which is a common sense decision, but one that the Royals have not made. And I just, when you look at the AL Central, I'm just hopeful that the Royals aren't going to be left behind by other teams using more intelligent processes going forward.
Here's my issue. This is a deal that actually smells just like a Royals deal, right? It's a bunch of guys that are right there. They've all tasted a little bit of big leagues. It worked out with Alcides Escobar. It worked out with Lorenzo Cain, that were guys in that deal. But historically, the Royals have always forsaken the guy they got to wait 3 years on, who might have much more talent, for a guy that is ready to go. They're always looking for major league ready. And if you're getting major league ready, you're getting a guy who's not that good, right? And that would be my fear if I'm a Tiger fan. Is this the Tigers hitting the fast forward on the rebuild button? Like what I want, I agree with everything you said, and I love the idea of moving Scott Barlow for talent that will be in the organization for 6 or 7 years and position talent. I'm absolutely 100% in agreement with you on that. But somewhere along the way, you've got to start going for the big upside guys, right? And that's by being more patient. Better talent, you will get better talent if you wait for guys that are further away. And that's what this deal, I wonder, and I'm intrigued by it. And whenever Keith Law puts his stamp on it, then I certainly respect that as much as anyone. But the thing that I would worry about if I were the Tigers, and why this one doesn't kill me as a Royals fan, is this is the Mark Tians and Mark showed some flashes of being more than that, and did end up being more than just a fringy guy. But that where you're accepting, you're just trying to fill some holes right now and not going for guys that will be real difference makers. And I'm not saying you're looking for A-Rod and Griffey and just that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about guys that can be a 6-year starter for you. And I don't know that any of these guys profile out as that.
The one thing I will say, what you're saying is absolutely true. The one thing that stuck out to me when this trade was made was that all 3 of these guys actually did play briefly for the Phillies last year. These were not guys in
an important season for the Phillies.
Right. Which, may be a good sign as well. I mean, they certainly have a higher floor than most prospects, but a lower ceiling. right? You're not getting both. You have to choose. And the Tigers chose to get guys who have a higher floor and closer to the majors. But the one thing that I would say that is in the Tigers' favor there is that all three of them are position players. The Royals will frequently do this with pitchers, and you get a pitcher who's ready for the major league ready pitching, because pitching is the currency of baseball, as we've heard over and over again. And I think that's where you run into the problem where, you might get a pitcher who can pitch in the major leagues right now, but he's never going to be any good. Whereas with position players, I think there's a little bit more upside that these guys, for one thing, if they're not quite everyday caliber starters, they can still be very useful in a utility role. But I think that there's also some upside with Vierling especially, that these could be, a guy could put up a 750 to 800 OPS and be a 2 to 3 win player. You mentioned Martin. Martin was a good player. The problem with Martin, if we had traded a Greg Soto for Martin, that would have been a great trade.
Yes.
The problem is we traded Carlos Beltran, Hall of Famer at his peak, and Martin was the best guy we got. But I just, it's so rare for the Royals to make a trade like this at all. When I think about the Royals, when the Royals trade a reliever, it's almost always a guy with 1 year or less left, right? They have really no choice, right? Kelvin Herrera, for instance, they traded him, the last year with like 4 months before free agency. And they got 3 guys who ended up doing basically nothing for the Royals. I think Kelvin Gutierrez was the only guy who actually played for them in the majors. Blake Perkins and Johannes Morel for the hardcore fans may remember those names, but those guys have never made the major leagues. But the probably the closest example the Royals have had to making a trade like this in the last, certainly since their World Championship, was probably Tim Hill. And I really wonder with Tim Hill if like the Padres basically just came a calling and offered so much talent for this guy that the Royals were just like, well, sure, well, I guess we'll trade him, because Tim Hill was an extreme specialist, right? Kind of a sidearm lefty. They traded him with, I think, 4 years left until free agency. It was just after 2 years in the major leagues. And nobody looked at Tim Hill as anybody, a needle mover at all in the bullpen. And they got, two players in that deal. They got Ronald Bolaños and Franchi Cordero. And Cordero, had a very tantalizing amount of talent, and they ultimately were able to move him and make him really the key to the Andrew Benintendi trade. So I'll give the Royals credit there that they actually used that. They took a reliever that they were never going to miss and turned him into talent. When they realized that Cordero might not be what they hoped, they were able to sort of sell him high as well. And Bolaños, has pitched for the Royals now for the last 3 years, hasn't really done much. But again, another guy who's like, well, he's close to the major leagues, but he's a pitcher and he's a 10th guy on a pitching staff at best. So, but the Royals are certainly, I wouldn't call that a bad trade, because Tim Hill is Tim Hill. We're not missing Tim Hill. So, but the danger, the problem is that the Royals haven't done this with Barlow. They didn't do this and haven't considered doing it with Josh Stillmont. Josh Stillmont a year ago was very similar to where Greg Soto is today, except he had 4 years of club control instead of 3. Josh Stillmont had a tremendous 2020 shortened season, but then had a very good 2021. The Royals could have gotten probably more talent than the Tigers has got if they traded Stillmont. And they already had a Barlow as their closer. They could have easily traded from excess. They chose not to do so. Stillmont had a disappointing 2022, lost the strike zone, wasn't completely healthy. His value has taken a huge hit. And it's just a missed opportunity. And I just feel like you look at the history of the Royals, of the bad Royals teams of the last 15 years, when they had quality relievers, and it's just one missed opportunity after another.
Yeah, no, it is. Anything left in free agency that you would have your eye on that they could swoop in? And I'm going to give you one name that I think getting him and putting him at the back of your bullpen with the sole intent of trading him, Aroldis Chapman, if he's healthy, to me, that's where we're at. Now money should be used to sign guys that both the club and the guy know this is just a showcase to get you dealt to a team that is in contention. That's what's left out there. You're going for Brandon Belt to play first base? No, you've got, we know we've got the Royals going to have to keep a space open for RyanO'Hearn, so that's not an option because he's got to fit back into the roster. Anything left that catches your fancy?
At this point, look, I'm if the Royals have any money left at this point, I'd just be happy if they re-signed Zach Greinke because that's probably better than anybody they're going to sign. I mean, Aroldis Chapman from a talent standpoint, would be a great sort of boom or bust guy where, like you said, if he has a really good year, if the Royals are in contention, great, you keep him. But if not, then he's going to be able to bring back a ton. I mean, the last time Aroldis Chapman was about to be a free agent, the Yankees were able to trade him to the Cubs and get Gleyber Torres as a prospect, right? So like Aroldis Chapman is such a unique talent. Even now, even if his fastball's diminished, he's still lefty. He throws like 99. So yeah, if he clicks and he's healthy, you could get a king's ransom for him at the trade deadline. But I would be stunned if the Royals had money in the kitty for Aroldis Chapman, particularly after blowing $17.5 million on Jordan Lyles. So once again, we come back around to that. We've talked about how they kind of need some outfield depth. And the guy I really wanted there, Michael Conforto. There were two guys that we talked about. Mitch Haniger. Mitch Haniger got a 3-year deal, and I think that was probably too rich for my blood anyway. But like Michael Conforto, 2 years, $36 million. He's getting $18 million a year. He's an opt out after the first year. But like for the money they gave Jordan Lyles for 2 years, I'd much rather have 1 year of Michael Conforto than 2 years of Jordan Lyles. And the Giants signed him. Okay, maybe the Royals wouldn't have been able to no matter what, but we'll never know because they don't try. They don't try for that end of the market.
Well, let's review now. Let's come back to the free agent because you brought that up. Your two picks. We did an exercise. If someone's new to the Kaufman Corner podcast, it was back in November. I can scroll here and tell you. It would have been the podcast that was dated, I want to say November. Topics here. It would have been our November 21st podcast. So I'm not sure that's when we would have recorded it. I'm not sure what episode number that would be. You can go back one at a time and kind of figure that out if you want to go back and hear this. But Randy and I, we took the Keith Law free agent list, and Keith Law had his top 50. And we said, listen, they're not getting anybody out of the top 15. So let's take one guy in the 16 to 30 range, and let's take another guy in the 31 to 50 range. Let's sign two guys for the Royals, or two guys that we would sign for the Royals. Randy just mentioned Mitch Haniger was his 16 to 30 guy. I think he was like 26 or something on Keith's deal. 3 years, $43.5 million with the Giants. The other one was Michael Conforto, 2 years, $36 million with the Giants. Funny how that works. San Francisco Giants, I think, are a smart organization. I think you should feel pretty good about yourself, Rany.
I do.
The Giants.
I must say I do.
Yeah. Now, what would it have taken for the Royals to get them? I pretty much used the extra year and $1 million per rule that it took to get Gil Mesh. 4 for $60 on Haniger. You've already said you think that's a little pricey on Haniger, so you probably wouldn't have been on board for that. 3 for would be let's call it 3 for $45 on Conforto. Would you be okay with that?
It'd be more like 3 and 55. If he's healthy, the big thing with him is healthy. He missed the full season with an injury. I think it was a shoulder injury. I'm not sure. I mean, presumably, like the Giants are pretty good about evaluating guys' health. I mean, they're the ones they went out and signed Carlos Rodon a year ago when, even after a good year, people were terrified that Carlos Rodon's shoulder was not healthy. That's why he only got a 2-year deal. It's actually a very similar contract to the one Conforto just signed. It was 2 years with an opt-out, and then Rodon was exceptional and opted out, but they got a really good value for 1 year. So the fact that the Giants think Conforto's healthy, presumably if he is healthy, yeah, I would, because a healthy Michael Conforto is an elite hitter. He is a top 10, if not top 5 corner outfielder, like right fielder in baseball. And I
so
think
3 for 57. That's $1 million more in an extra year.
I would certainly consider it. I would certainly be offering the 2 and maybe 2 and 40 or something along those lines. The point is, if we had heard that the Royals were in it, but just got outbid, I'd at least respect that they're willing to try.
Right.
I don't think they made a phone call to his agent, who happens to be Scott Boras. So maybe they talked to him about somebody else. I don't know. But the point is, I don't think they ever seriously considered trying to sign Michael Conforto.
Well,
And that's what bothers me.
Yeah. And they appear to be content on waiting on their position players. The two names that I had, Nathan Eovaldi, was in the 16 to 30 range for one starting pitcher, and then Andrew Heaney was in the 31 to 50. Eovaldi signed 2 years, $34 million with the Rangers. That's about as high as I would have thought about going if I were the Kansas City Royals, and I don't think I would be happy with 3 for 54 if that's what it took to get him the extra year and the extra million. Andrew Heaney, 2 for 25 million, also signing with the Rangers. I too feel validated, a team that's going all in and trying to win. That I identified a couple of guys.
Are you sure you want to identify with the team that hired Dayton Moore?
Yeah, I feel validated that they want to win and they see these guys as people that can help them win. I don't feel as validated as I think you should feel with the Giants going, because the Giants are really the brain trust. This may be just frivolous spending, but if it had taken 3 for 42 to get Andrew Heaney, I'm probably okay with that. That's
the risk there is just it's a pitcher with an injury history, right?
Yes.
If he's healthy, yes, 100%. But that's the risk you take. And the Royals they've taken risks in the past. They just this winter just seems so risk averse, and I hope it's just a fluke. I hope it's just a 1-year blip. I hope that they really believe that between the young hitters they've got and the young pitchers that they've got, but now that they've got coaches that can actually help coach them up a little, that they don't need to take risks for this 1 year until they see what they've got. So if this is a blip and next year they're a very different team in free agency and making trades, then fine, I guess.
So
but
I'll give you one more name. Joey Gallo, we talked about. He signed 1 year, $11 million with the Twins, basically replacing somebody as their swing and miss, swing for the fence guy. Miguel Sano is the guy he clearly replaced. They changed one swing and miss guy for another. It can't cost much to get Miguel Sano. And if you've got these swing doctors, there's immense power in Miguel Sano's bat if you can make it run into the ball enough. And if you could get him to swing a little less, he could still hit the ball over the wall. Why? Like, it doesn't have to be Sano. I'm just giving him as an example of a guy who's hit the ball hard over the years, who's not that old. And these are the types of reclamation projects, be it hitters or pitchers, that the Royals need to cash on. Dylan Bundy in a 1 year, prove it, fix him.
I've liked Dylan Bundy since he came out of the draft. Like, that's the thing. That's what was so aggravating with Jordan Lyles. It's like, you could have fine. We're already out of the top 50 free agent tier, but could you have signed Dylan Bundy? Like, I would have been more excited about that than Jordan Lyles. Miguel Sano specifically, like you mentioned, Joey Gallo. Yes, I think the kind of high upside. Yes, a lot of swing and miss, but also tons of power. Joey Gallo, and also who actually is an underrated defender. Joey Gallo is actually a really good defensive outfielder. Yes. Miguel Sano is one of the few guys I would actually say, from everything I've heard, an immense talent, but he can be his own worst enemy. And just from a clubhouse perspective, if they just said we don't want that around, I completely understand.
I get that if they hadn't been building a clubhouse to lose for decades.
Yeah, but I don't know.
I would buy that if the clubhouse thing had worked for them for more than 3 years.
The fact that it didn't work doesn't mean that bringing in a guy who's going to, not get along with people is going to make things better. I mean, the Royals did that already. They did that with Jose Guillen. I don't think, and it didn't work out. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the team really started to turn a corner around the time Jose Guillen left the team in 2011, 2012. So the idea sounded, I just think the specific player, Miguel Sano, is probably not there. But Joey Gallo, who is similar talent on the field, very much, 1 year, $11 million. I mean, the less money guaranteed than Jordan Lyles. Again, it's Jordan. You know who Jordan Lyles reminds me of? And I can't believe I have to say this name out loud. I'm terrified. Scott Ellerton. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Scott Ellerton? Yes. That was maybe the last free agent signing of the Allard Baird era. The 2006 Royals. Scott Ellerton 2 years, $8 million, which after inflation and, the change in revenues is not much different than 2 years and 17 and a half today. Scott Ellerton, the Royals wouldn't pay, the premium rate for a really good pitcher. So they went out and paid 70% for a fake, for someone's idea of a good pitcher. And Scott Ellerton he's basically almost like the poster child for the 2006 Royals, having one of the worst pitching staffs of all time. And it's ironic because the following winter, Dayton Moore was in charge and didn't waste his time with 2 years and $8 million total, 2 years and $4 million a year. He went outside Gilmesh, right? Which was one of the ballsiest contracts the Royals have ever given out. And for at least the first half of that contract was absolutely brilliant signing, because he signed a guy who actually could be a needle mover, could actually be a number 2 starter, and was a number 2 starter until basically they overworked him and he got hurt. But Gilmesh was great. This is Scott Ellerton all over again. Tell me how Jordan Lyles is any better now than Scott Ellerton was when the Royals signed him. He's the same age.
I can't.
It's basically the same guy.
It's the same guy. It is. Let's finish with this. Cotman brings up an interesting. Here's the nuclear option for those catching us via the podcast. Cotman in the chat room says, here's the nuclear option. How mad would we be if they signed Trevor Bauer? First of all, if you're going to tell me Miguel Sano doesn't have a place in that clubhouse, I'm quite confident Trevor Bauer will not be invited to Bible study in the Kaufman clubhouse either.
I was going to say, there's a reason why the Royals didn't show interest in Trevor Bauer 10 years ago, or, when he was in the draft, or 8 years ago when he had already worn out his welcome with the Diamondbacks and they traded him to Cleveland. I'm comfortable in saying I don't have to consider this question. It's a moot question because the Royals, they still have, Dayton Moore may be gone, but JJ Piccolo and everyone else is still there. They're not signing Trevor Bauer. And in this case, let's just say I don't disagree with them. I don't think that headache and that all the complications that brings, I am comfortable with the Royals not signing a guy who has been accused of multiple sexual offenses. Let him be someone else's problem.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. All right, that's going to do it for this week. Back at it next week. We may have some guests we're going to be talking about. We're lining up here moving forward. We'll just keep following Rany on Twitter at Jazayerli, Jazayerli, and follow me at Soren Petro, SORENPETRO. We hope we'll be talking about some fantastic move or a trade or some wheeling and dealing. In all likelihood, one of our buddies who knows baseball very well will be coming on and will be lamenting, right? That's probably what's going to happen. So we want to thank everybody for joining us, whether you catch us on the podcast or live Sunday nights at 10 p.m. That's when we stream live for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro. Thank you very much for joining us here